those of you who don't know me are probably wondering why in the world there is a pediatric occupational therapist talking to you about screen time. If you know what an occupational therapist is, you might have had your child work with them at doing handwriting or fine motor skills, or maybe writing your child's sensory diet. But my specialty is actually in sensory integration and learning. So what that means is sensory integration is the way that we take in information from the world around us and how we organize that information in our brain and in our body to adapt to the world around us. So it's much more than just motor skills or moving too fast or moving too slow. It's really the way that our body and our brain experiences the world. And that's something that is really changing as a result of having more and more technology in the world. Because as that sensory information comes together, what's supposed to happen is that our brain organizes the information so that we can actually build a lot of connections in our brain that will allow us to go through the process of development and become learn words, be able to get more coordinated, develop social skills, learn to read, participate in school. All of these things are really critical to the developmental process. And sorry, I just want to get to my notes here. And I really want to make sure that what you walk away with today is an understanding on how technology is impacting that process and what we need to do, whether you're a parent, an educator, or someone who is supporting children in the community, to be able to rebalance the role of technology in our lives and give our children the best chance possible to grow and develop to their full potential. So, there are all of these stages of development, and at the very bottom is sensory motor. And we have to experience the world first with our bodies before we can attach words and language, communicate with other people, and then develop all of those thinking skills so that we can learn and problem solve and adapt. But kids that are growing up in a digital world are not doing near as much movement as we used to do. We're spending a lot of time in sedentary activities, and a lot of children, even at a very young age, are watching videos on YouTube, or there's even iPads that are mounted in baby cradles, things like that, that are giving children very early exposure to technology, but it's a trade-off in the natural way that the brain was meant to learn. Now, we've lost a lot of the opportunities then if we're always have a screen kind of between us and everyone else to connect with people instead of devices, not next to the devices, instead of the devices, to build relationships, to build connection to family, connection to your peers, and kids end up developing a constant need for stimulation. So it's not just the peers, we have to have the iPads, the phones, and that additional stimulation coming at us at the same time. So the brain actually gets rewarded for multitasking instead of being present in the moment in these social experiences and learning experiences that are so critical for children's development. And we've lost something called white space. White space is just space where there's really low amounts of stimulation. The kids have a really hard time being bored. Even in the waiting room, we're watching videos waiting to get called in by the doctor, or watching videos while we're driving on the way to an activity, instead of creating a calm space where kids actually have to be on output. They have to go out into the world and explore, to exercise, to get creative. And a lot of these things, while some of our children are doing it, some of them are doing it with the tablet very, very close by. Or even if they're doing it with their parents have their tablets and their cell phones very close by. So we definitely are experiencing a very different world. And the process of development then gets disrupted. So children get wired for distraction and disorganization because there's so much stimulation coming in. It's changing the way that our brain responds because we just can't handle it all. Now, this isn't new information because in 2007, we got the iPhone. And that was the first time that all these things that we used to do separately, right? We used to sit at our computer and then we closed it down and we went on about our lives and we came back later. Or we had our Palm Pilot or something to organize us. And then we put it back in our purse or our briefcase and we moved on. We didn't walk around with it in our hand. But when all this technology converged, we could take it anywhere and we could use it everywhere at all times. We didn't have to put it down. So we lost our boundaries and we haven't really been able to get them back because as everyone's adopted technology, now everyone is trying to get our attention, right? It's the marketers, it's people sending us text messages, it's a social media app, it's another video on YouTube. We have so many short videos and YouTube shorts on every social media app. You could blow through 20 or 30 of them and get very distracted and separated from the rest of your life in the process. So marketers have figured out how to get your attention because there's just so many things out there that we have that someone has to try to cut through the noise. And the way that they do that is being louder and louder about the notifications and people reaching out to you. And because they're setting up a whole bunch of automated emails, they don't even know how much noise they're kind of sending into your space and your child's space at the same time. But it's really tapping into a lot of those emotional needs that people have. It's hard to put down your phone and then shift to something else because half of your attention is always on the device that's kind of nearby, waiting for the next thing to happen. And the same is true with children, even when the tablets or the Chromebooks are sitting, next to them or nearby in the classroom, but they aren't actively using them at that moment. So it's great at giving us tons of rewards to keep us connected and pull us in, but it's not connected to each other. It's connected to the companies and the apps and the technology so that you are a constant customer. Now, the problem is that kids are really having more and more problems with attention and focus. They're more dysregulated. They have a lot more trouble calming down and focusing. And they can't kind of stop and make the shift to show up for the rest of life. And I think maybe some of you, if you ask yourself the same question as parents or maybe people who get constant texts from work, that you might be experiencing some of the exact same things that your kids are. The other great thing as far as kids are concerned about technology is in places like video games, if you're not good at life in the real world, or maybe you're constantly getting reprimanded for being distracted and not listening, you can be your own hero in the video game. You can have whatever personality you want to feel happy and successful. So there's also an emotional draw to participating in these types of things that on a social level helps you for a very, very brief time feel a little better about yourself. But it only lasts for a second, right? Because there's always another post. There's never enough likes. There's never enough shares. There's never enough comments. You always end up restarting the game. So it's just another way to keep our kids constantly engaged with technology instead of engaged with life. And then we see when we take them off of the technology that they may not be eating and sleeping properly. They're not getting enough movement. They're spending way more time sitting than we did 15 years ago. They're having less face-to-face social experiences. They're losing track of time. Their attention span is getting shorter and shorter because of their experience on technology. And they're also having more and more trouble remembering things because it's just too much. So we are left with kids who are distracted and disorganized and dysregulated, and we don't know what to do. So think about it this way. We all have human needs, right? And the basic human needs are certainty. I need to feel safe. Variety. I need new things and novelty. Significance. I need to feel important to somebody or something. I need to feel loved and connected to other people. I need to do something where I feel like I'm growing and I'm contributing something bigger to the world that the world will remember. Technology is tapping into those lower needs, right? Certainty. I know that I could just restart the game. If I die, nothing's lost. Variety. As many videos as you want, as many times as you can tap the button, as many places as you want to go on the internet. And significance, I'm trying to be an influencer. I'm trying to get noticed or get a bunch of likes. I think that that's actually one of the number one things that kids say is that they want to be an influencer when they grow up these days. But that significance only lasts for a really brief time until the next person puts their post up. And it's like it's never enough because 3 to 4 posts a day still isn't enough to get you to be significant. But when we meet higher needs and when kids feel safe and connected in the world, that's when you build more lasting happiness and success, and kids feel better about themselves. So the unfortunate thing is that what we're seeing, even in the statistics, and it wasn't just after COVID, it was happening way before COVID too, is that anxiety has increased to 9.4% in teens. 44% of teens in 2021 were feeling sad and hopeless. And they're the ones that are spending the most time on social media, supposedly having tons and tons of friends to interact with. The number of children receiving special education in Connecticut is now up to 15.9%. That's the highest that it's ever been. So more kids are needing support in learning. And don't worry, we're going to talk about why this is in a second. 15% of kids are receiving special education under a category called other health impaired, and that's more than the number of kids receiving support for autism. So that is also the category where ADHD gets put when you are getting additional supports for children. And cyberbullying was at 16% compared to 8% from 2009 to 2021. So remember, 2009 was just after the smartphone came into being. So the changes that we're seeing in our children are physical, they're emotional, and they're cognitive. So one of the things that happens is that the screens give off blue light, and that's normal light that we get from the sun. So that's why it makes us feel happy. But when you have blue light right in front of your eyes, especially at nighttime, it actually stops the process of sleep. It stops melatonin production. So kids sleep less, especially if you're the kid who's playing video games very late at night and you have the added stimulation to keep you awake in the process. Now, we also are seeing much more children having problems with their vision, and nearsightedness is now becoming one of the main problems in our society as far as vision is concerned. There is also something called computer vision syndrome, which affects even 7 years ago at this point, 2015, was affecting 19.7% of kids. So I'm sure that number has gone up. So this is red, watery eyes, difficulty focusing. So imagine that you're already distracted because of all the time that you spend on computers. Now add to that your eyes are not working for you. So it's actually hard for you to sustain visual attention to things over time. And then another thing is that a lot of kids are experiencing dry eyes, which is a very, very common problem. When you play video games, you don't blink as much. But I think across the board, the use of technology is really affecting all vision in so many different ways. And the other thing that's happening is our posture, right? Flexible seating was great, but flexible seating with a Chromebook in your hand or a tablet in all different places at home and at school leads to a lot of bad posture. And kids are getting what's called tech neck. So their back is hurting, their neck is hurting, they have eye problems, and they're also reporting changes in how they're feeling psychologically and their social behavior. So some of our kids can get very upset and irritable because their eyes and their back are hurting. They have old people problems at a very, very young age, and we're not even tuning into that a lot of times. Now, screen use also really impacts learning because our experience of the world is mostly through our eyes and ears. It's not through our whole body. And if you remember from the beginning, your brain uses sensory cues from your body and how you move through the world to be able to make sense of your experiences and be more adaptable and problem solving. And I think a lot of us would agree that many of our children are not very adaptable and they don't have great problem solving skills. They get overwhelmed very, very easily. And we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to help them feel good and feel calm and be able to get their homework done, go to sleep when they're supposed to, and even, just follow a routine throughout the day. So the other thing that's happening is something called digital dementia. And that means they just can't retain it all. The volume of information on the internet is so huge that they're getting so much coming in. And then on top of it, what's happening is that the computer is saving so much, right? Google Drive in Google Classroom saves so much information. You can't possibly remember it all, but kids are doing what's called outsourcing their brain to technology. We used to have to remember phone numbers. We used to have to try to remember combinations to the locker or different types of numbers and addresses and things like that. But we don't have to anymore. We can just save it somewhere, right? So when we automate the simple memory tasks and we increase the amount of information that's coming into a child's brain, the result is that their memory starts to go down. And in my practice, I've seen more and more kids that even if they're really, really smart and they've learned a lot of things, they actually have what's called very poor working memory. They have trouble pulling information when they need it because that involves your brain being able to connect and reconnect information that's coming in. But if the volume's too high, that's not going to happen. There was a study done, and it's a 10-year study, so it's still in process, called the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. And the most significant findings are that kids who spend more than 2 hours a day on screens get lower scores on thinking and language tests. So adding more technology is not necessarily the answer to helping kids learn, even if we have the ability to individualize the learning on some level by having them work at their own pace on computers. That's not to say that there isn't some value in the learning games. It's just to say that it's not a replacement for effective teaching and teachers who are able to use technology in balance with all their other teaching strategies. There are also significant differences in the brains of kids who used tablets and smartphones for more than 7 hours a day. They actually started losing connections in their brains at a much earlier age than what normally happens, affecting the way that they're taking in and processing information from the world. And to me, that seems kind of scary because we should be getting more development before our brain starts pruning off the things that we don't need. And the last area is the social emotional impact. So kids are feeling uncomfortable in their bodies. They're struggling with learning and memory, and they're trying to figure out how to get noticed and feel important and meet all of their emotional needs through social media apps and group texts and whatnot on the phone. So there's a lot more loneliness and depression. It's not helping them feel like they have close relationships with their peers. There's a lot more anxiety for all kinds of reasons. And kids are always chasing that comparison to others, being significant, standing out, getting the most likes. And it's hard to stand out in a world where different is normal, right? Everybody's trying to come up with their different thing to get noticed. And if you're just an average person, you kind of blend into the background. So there's a lot of things to think about, and I would love to keep having a discussion about this at the end. The other things to keep in mind are the desensitization to how your words affect other people on social media, comments, gaming chat rooms, because you're not really thinking about, and you can't see the facial expressions on the person on the other side. There's also potential negative influences that are out there in those chat rooms, in those video game chats, and on social media that are engaging with children that you may not want. And sometimes when they have their headphones on, you don't actually know who they're talking to. So being present as a parent and really monitoring that can go a very, very long way to making sure that your child is getting the right messages, or the messages that you feel are in their best interest, I should say. The challenge when you have a child who has additional needs, like a child who has attention deficit disorder or autism, or learning disabilities or sensory processing issues, they already have trouble with time management. They already have trouble paying attention. They already have trouble sleeping. They're already distractible. They already have problems with social skills. So they are also the kids that lean into technology even more than other kids, because it's a done for you kind of place. It's easier, and the rest of the world is really, really hard for them. So all the things that are coming as a result of the impact of technology for kids with neurodiversity can be even more extreme, and are things that as parents we need to be paying attention to make sure that we're advocating for our child in our homes, at school, in the community, to really find that balance between technology and filling in the gaps in those skills that kids are lacking. I think one of the things to think about with COVID and technology is that we kind of learned what we don't want, right? It was really great in that it allowed us to be able to try to teach our children when they couldn't go to school, that we could have Zoom parties and we could reach out to our relatives and stay connected when we had to be isolated. But most of us, by the end, we couldn't wait to get back out into the world, right? We didn't want to be in all separate rooms with everyone doing different technology and working. We wanted to sign up for activities and go to camp and be with people. But we also learned that the process of going back to that for some kids was really, really hard, while other people were just dying for some real multisensory connection with the world around them. So if you feel like your house kind of still looks like this, I think it's worth asking a lot of questions. Is my family having an experience that's kind of out of balance with the way that our children are meant to develop so that they can be happy and healthy and feel successful in the world? There's a major difference between the computers and the human mind. Computers organize in algorithms, right? So that means that they're always going to tell you the next thing that you should watch on YouTube based on what you watched before. But brains are amazing in that they're always connecting and reconnecting information. in all the experiences that we had throughout the day and in life. So that's what helps kids be creative. That's what helps them be adaptable. That's what helps them problem solve. And the way that we get there is through multisensory experiences in the world, where we feed the foundation of sensory development so that we can get to these higher level skills of control of our emotions, memory, communication with others, confidence, learning, and participation in social experiences. So now that we've kind of looked at all these bits and pieces, hopefully what you are starting to realize is that we need to kind of shift our lens, because our children's brains are experiencing the world very differently than we did when we were younger. If you are a younger parent and you grew up in the millennial generation, you already were starting to use computers and smartphones and whatnot at a higher rate than, let's say, my generation. But I can tell you for sure, I am an active smartphone user, and I have way more technology than I would like to have in my life, to the point where I do have to start choosing and setting up my own boundaries to get my focus and my sanity back in the process. So I'm sure that our children are definitely in that same boat. And I would encourage you to have compassion for that, compassion for some of the behaviors that we're seeing and the irritability that we're seeing, and start to think about, where might this be coming from and how can I support my child to feel safe and successful in the world. Because we're not getting rid of technology. It's something that's going to keep growing and keep becoming more and more a part of life. So now let's talk about the formula for success. The formula for success is not technology, right? When we look at these blocks, the bottom is taking care of your body, right? Making sure that we're moving, that we're breathing, that we learn how to breathe if we can't breathe well, that we're eating the right things, that we're having gratitude, that we're able to look around and see the good things in the world, visualizing your goals, visualizing in general, which we'll come back to, and then being able to learn and execute so that you can feel like you're growing and you're contributing to the world, you're contributing to your family, you're contributing to your friend group, and getting the deeper positive feedback and a sense of self-worth that our kids are looking for, but that always seems to fall short in the world of social media and video games. So let's start at the bottom. Right? If you're going to move more, what's going to be the best way to move? The research says 3 things. 1, do something that involves rhythm, pressure, respiration. So yoga and breathing, those kinds of things. You don't have to be a yoga person, but definitely breathing and slow movement, slow rhythmic movement to reduce stress and cortisol levels in your brain, because cortisol actually causes cell death in your brain, and that shrinks the part of your brain that is supposed to help you regulate your emotions. So it shrinks your limbic system. Now, if we're in a constant state of stress because the video game is really, really high paced, or we're constantly checking our phones, and then additionally, the learning is hard, we're having problems with our friends that day, they had a fight with mom, whatever it is, a lot of our kids are in a constant state of stress. So they're actually decreasing their ability to manage stress in the future just by being in that place so often. So we want to shift that piece for them. We also want to make sure that we increase their heart rate, because when their heart rate goes up, we actually get something called brain-derived neurotropic hormone, and that is what we need to stimulate brain growth. So getting up, getting moving, raising your heart rate is the best way to actually start to get some of those connections back. And last, cognitively engaging exercises. So not just sit-ups, but things where we have to focus and think a little bit, have a stronger effect on executive functions, which are a big topic of conversations in PPT meetings lately, and adaptability and goal-directed behavior. This is my body activated learning framework. I developed this as all these technological advances were happening. And I think really it's a very, very simple path to thinking about what kinds of movement a child needs so that they can start to rebalance movement and screen time and technology in their life. So you'll see that there's 4 kinds of exercises: restoring, energizing, activating, and regrouping. Restoring exercises are exactly what I just mentioned to you. That is the breathing and the rhythm and the pressure. Energizing exercises increase your heart rate. So they're fast, they're unpredictable, you're using your muscles, you're getting moving. And then activating exercises are things that involve goals, right? Even something as simple as like giving someone a high five is still a goal, because you have to focus on where your partner's hands are. And then regrouping activities are the things that you need to recover and de-stress from screen time. So restoring exercises have rhythm, pressure, and breathing. If you can't breathe very well because maybe you just don't have good motor planning skills because you have additional needs, you can lean into the rhythm and the pressure. Energizing, like I said, fast, unpredictable. Raise your heart rate. It doesn't even have to be coordinated. Just moving your head and tipping it in different directions will help to raise your heart rate. And then activating connects all the senses of the body so that everything is firing and wiring together. These are the things that you need to be doing on the back end of technology, or maybe even at the end of your exercise plan for the day. And that is stretching, taking a vision break. So something as easy as cupping your hands over your eyes and shutting out the visual input. They actually did a study of body activated learning in a school district in Washington, and even just using the eye cupping as the only extra thing, the teachers saw a major difference in the children's self-regulation and their focus and participation. Now, they were also doing movement breaks and whatnot throughout the day, but they decided to add on extra vision breaks because they were so effective. So if you take one thing away and implement into your classroom, I would tell you for sure, this is probably one of the easiest things that you can do. So the way that body activated learning sequences work is you can do something really simple that only takes 2 minutes, right? I can move really fast with my body and then do some reaching things and then do eye cupping. When I have my eyes covered, I would encourage you to do something called visualizing with students if you were to use this in the classroom. And that means now that we've shut out the visual input, you might give an instruction, or you might have them think of themselves, visualize themselves doing something well, like you're going into reading and they're not good readers. So they might be imagining that they can actually read the page today. Little things like that will actually help kids start to look internally and look into their memory bank, activate that working memory, and get them visualizing themselves accomplishing a goal, whether it's an instruction or something that they're usually not as good at, and prime those pathways so that kids can go into the next task in a goal-directed and more focused way. Sometimes you might not want to start with energizing kinds of things because really your classroom is crazy and you need to calm down. And so instead you can do something really rhythmic like palm presses, where you breathe in and breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and then do some of those other activating movements, and even do some eye exercises to strengthen the eye muscles that are getting so tired out during the school day. You still want to end with stretching and the vision breaks and the breathing, but all of this you can do in 2 to 3 minutes, a couple times a day, and they can be really, really effective in just priming all of those pathways and supporting focus and attention. If you're a parent or you have a little bit more space in, let's say you're running a community group, you can expand on these kinds of concepts and make them more activities, right? You can add blowing games and bubbles and balloons, anything to give kids more rhythm and pressure, like rhythmic dancing, things like that can also be good ways to make a movement into an activity and still have the child get the same benefit. Energizing things. This could be dancing. This could be, spinning in an office chair. Maybe, you have big balloons. Maybe you have, let's see, what else? Beanbag chairs, anything like that, where you can run, crash, spin, flip, anything to get going. And I'm sure some kids that are constantly have the on button on. These are the kids that might need energizing activities, but then you always have to follow up with something that slows them down and is a little more calm, or it's going to be really hard to get back on task at the end. And that's why actually the framework is done as a series of 3, because even though you're giving energy to the body and you're stimulating all those connections in the brain, we don't want to disorganized children. We always want to get them back into a place where they're focused and oriented towards the next goal. So activities in the classroom might even be setting up little stations to work on sight words by turning and touching. That would be an activating exercise. You could set up little obstacle courses or movement stations if you have an after school program. All of these things are going to prime all those pathways, get their bodies working for them instead of against them, and combat all the sitting that they're doing. And then the regrouping activities then are things that cut the stimulation, right? It might be hiding, it might be stretching, it might be playing heads up 7-up or hide and seek or something like that. Those are all ways to expand on regrouping and embed it in an activity-oriented kind of activity. Now, let's talk about screen time for a second, because everybody asks, how much is too much, right? And the American Academy of Pediatrics sent out a general guideline. Under 18 months, they don't want you to use any at all. At 2 to 5 years, only 1 hour a day, but they want you to only have kids watch it with their parents so that you could talk about it. And 6 and older, just place consistent limits and make sure it doesn't take the place of adequate sleep and physical activity. So that sounds like we don't actually have a recommended number of hours. It then becomes the responsibility of the adults in a child's space to create that balance. But we don't have that experience. We didn't grow up in a world learning the habits and routines of managing technology. And in fact, the world is actually pushing us more and more to use technology throughout the day and all day. And as adults, a lot of us know that we're impacted. So it's not a far leap to expect that our children are being impacted too in a lot more ways than we are. And it's definitely something where we now have to come up with our own strategies. So that's something I hope you walk away with today, is more strategies. I am going to give you a link to a digital download. It is available in both Spanish and English. If you haven't taken a million notes, there's some quick summaries of what we've been talking about today in there. And there is also a screen time chart so that parents can start thinking how much screen time you're using in any particular category. Is it that a child has a lot of access to technology during leisure time or a lot of access to technology during academics? Are there places where it's really out of balance? Because we can start to just take one piece at a time and rebalance that process. It's not going to happen overnight, but in the areas where our kids are using screens the most, we can try to find opportunities to replace the activities with things that are non-screen based. So now we're at the parent action steps, and actually I'm making pretty good time. So I'm hoping that we're going to have a really good discussion after this. First action step, if you're a parent, be present. It's very easy to get interrupted by technology, right? But the research shows that the technology interruptions actually increase kids' problem behaviors. Even my puppy knows when I'm spending too much time answering text messages on my phone. So my daughter might be off at practice and I decide I'm going to answer a few extra emails, but I'm standing in the kitchen. He makes sure that I know that he's there too, and I need to pay attention to him. And I do know from my experience working with kids that it's exactly the same in the dynamic as they're interacting with their parents as well. So children need your guidance and they need your modeling to learn how to manage technology, to separate themselves from technology, put it in a separate room, turn on the focus, whatever you have to do so that you can be more present, at least for certain times of the day, even if it's not all day long, because it's impossible to completely be off your phone and off your devices. Make a family media plan. You can, I'll show you in a minute where you can get that family media plan. And I also put the link to the plan in the free download. Create white space. What can you do in your home to set up screen-free times and screen-free zones? Are you going to set a no phones at the dinner table rule, or have a storage spot for everybody's devices when they go to bed at night? Add in move with a purpose. If your child's more coordinated and can do sports, great. Maybe you need to do more backyard games, or maybe you need to do simpler obstacle courses, or get a mini indoor trampoline for your child if they don't have as much coordination. Whatever you can do, add in movement opportunities that are away from screens so that you can be present and they can get the movement that they need so that their brains can be developing, and their regulation can improve so that they're not as stressed out, because exercise is not just for brain development, as we talked about, it's also to reduce stress so that our bodies are better able to adapt and respond to stress in the future. Make plans for a weekly digital detox. So find places to go and times where you can have low stimulation, where you're out in nature, or you have quiet spaces that you've set up in your house to like a tent to read a book, yoga, meditation, and make sure that those spaces and those times that you're carving out, hopefully, even if you can only do a half day, have little to no screens, and that even think about what could you accomplish as a family? Could you all do a cooking project together that doesn't involve looking on the phone for the recipe? Maybe print it out in advance or write it down in advance so that you don't have screens during that particular project. So be present. Think about, try to shift that need to stay connected. Most teens consider themselves to be addicted to their mobile devices, but 27% of parents of those teens say that they have the same problem. So this is something that's affecting everyone. Here is the link to the home planning tool. It's at healthychildren.org. And if you want to type family media plan in the search box on the site, that's the fastest way to get to the home planning tool, as the link is quite long, as you can see. Think about family time and phone-free zones. Even small boundaries can make a really big difference in your mental space and your feeling of stress, and you're going to see that difference in your children as well. Think about where you can go, things that you can do, make a list, make this a family event on setting up those digital detox plans. If you are a teacher or an educator, maybe you want to rethink some of your wiggle breaks if you tend to use a lot of screens, because screens do not give you a vision break and kids cannot tip and turn and spin around because their eyes are focused on the screen. So up level your brain breaks and your wiggle breaks with body activated learning types of activities so that you can help kids prime their senses for learning and engage them in that proactive, purposeful movement. It doesn't have to be high coordination, but if you can shift away from the screens for even part of the time, I think you'll see a big difference. Use that visualization and those vision breaks that we talked about earlier. Plan for tech-free learning times, times when you might turn off the smartboard, times when you might do more kinesthetic learning activities with kids. And if you have downtime where where kids are having extra time to access educational games or access a tablet or something while they're waiting for everyone else to finish, think about if there's a way in your classroom to be able to provide alternative activities that might be things like word searches that are on a piece of paper, or donated games that people contribute to your classroom. There's a lot of ways, especially when we're all stuck inside in the middle of winter and we can't go outside to play, that we can be creative and not immediately default to the smart board or put up TikToks or something like that. And instead offer opportunities that are going to be multisensory, but also allow kids to connect with their peers in a different way. So swap those wiggle breaks, start and end your day with movement, find those tech-free spaces and tech-free times that you can build in your day, and add mindful movements to your lessons and transitions. If you are a teenager, or if you are working with kids at the high school level, don't think that this kind of thing doesn't apply to you. My daughter actually has teachers now at the high school level that offer fidgets and things during tests to help kids manage their stress and anxiety. And they also, some of the teachers purposely do have, if they don't have to keep their phone in their bag, are purposely taking times to have them close their Chromebooks and not use Google Classroom, and instead do something that is more whole class oriented and interactive in nature, that doesn't involve slides and videos and screens like that. So build in that visualization, have kids see themselves doing something. If you're a gym teacher, this is a great place to use visualization when kids are trying to accomplish a goal after they've practiced. Then they can visualize themselves doing it well and reattempt it. If you're watching a video or reading a story, you can always stop at the end of the story, do the eye cupping, and work on building those pictures and the movie in their mind of what's happening. Kids spend so much time receiving visual information that this is actually something that more and more I'm finding in my practice, and for kids who come to get evaluated by me, they're on the non-planned plan. They don't have those pictures in their head to guide them in what they're doing. So they're constantly looking outward for some visual clue about what to do. And then they end up taking in too much information and distracting themselves, especially if they have a really busy classroom or, or really busy home environment, or there's multiple children around. There's any number of things that can pull their attention in a million directions because they're already wired for distraction through technology. One thing you can do also at the high school level and at the middle school level is, after like 20 minutes of internet research, if you're working on a project, have kids get up and walk away. Like, you can take a loop around the building and practice thinking and visualizing and consolidating the information. This is what we did when we went to the library. The walk to the library, the act of shifting from the catalog to the books on the shelf to the photocopy machine, every space in between was white space, and it was a multi-sensory experience. So as we were reading the information and then shifting and going over to the copy machine to take what we needed, our brain was working hard to consolidate that information. Now you can do everything all on one piece of technology. So even though that seems to make it really, really easy, that's not the natural way that the brain was meant to take time to internalize and consolidate information. So something that you can do is even making a storyboard with sticky notes before you have the kids put it into the slide deck. And the act of writing, the act of organizing and moving those little slides around as sticky notes can be a really powerful multisensory tool that helps them learn and organize and retain that information a little bit better. So think about those alternatives like we talked about. What works well in your classroom, depending on the age of the children that you're working with. What could you add, or what could you shift about the balance in some of the teaching strategies? And then the last area is the community initiatives. What can we do in the community and in our community programs that are supporting kids? Same thing, if we can add more movement to before and after school programs, sponsor digital detox events, where can we start to raise awareness in the community about this issue and get more people to understand what's happening? Can we have device-free zones and device-free events? Those are actually starting to become really popular now, but just even if it was always device-free, it's kind of like adding the word gluten-free to ketchup, right? It was always gluten-free, but now that it says it, we're much more aware. The same happens with screens. If we start to call events out on the fact that they're meant to be screen-free, that we're proactively not using our phones at the event, then we can start to raise awareness, but also start to give people experiences of events that don't involve technology, so that they can start thinking about how they're feeling at the events, how their kids are behaving over time as they repeat the process, and be able to start to make more judgment on the value of different things that you're adding into your life now that are screen-free. And even in the mental health programs, I think it's really worthwhile to start asking questions about screen time and social media and video game play, because we know that it is a contributing factor to a lot of the emotional struggles that kids are experiencing today. So think about these device-free dance parties. You could have a disconnect day, or do real life gaming instead of video gaming, and then change your language, right? Understand that kids are struggling, right? Let's talk self-awareness, not self-control. It looks like your body's having trouble. What do you think you need to help you concentrate? Well, you've been focusing really hard. Let's take an eye break before we start the next activity. In using that sort of language, you can help kids build that connection. Is I need to do this to help my body feel better, or to be successful at this thing over here. And as they start to make those mental connections, I can tell you from experience with a lot of the kids that I work with, they start asking for and doing those things on their own, because they realize how helpful it is. So help them figure out what works best for them so that things are easier. And in doing all of this, you're going to get the motor skills, you're going to get the social skills, you'll get the play skills, you'll help them develop a sense of confidence and self-worth and want to show up in the world, instead of opting out of the world and trading real life for more and more screen time. So let's try to figure out, and hopefully in this conversation, we can come up with some additional strategies that I haven't mentioned yet to meet these human needs on a bigger level, and help kids start to implement this formula for success so that they can go out into the world. It's not going to be easy. It's a major shift in the way that you're thinking, and it's not a done for you button. It does take work to put boundaries back in that technology has taken away, but filling time with things that make them feel good on a deeper level. I can tell you from experience, I've seen tech addicted children shift into choosing either tech-free or minimal tech activities once they have skills that help them succeed. And we might have to start small and think bigger. This is not an overnight process, but think about in our conversation, what can you do to take action? What questions haven't I answered? And definitely go to aubreyschmalley.com. I tried to make it nice and easy for you to remember to get the free digital download. If you put in your information in the pop-up, you will get access to both the English and the Spanish version. So this is something that everybody can have and can benefit from. The last thing I want to mention, I told you at the beginning that we would have a survey. It's very, very short, 3 questions. And then there's a couple additional questions. If you are a community partner or an educator and you want to keep this conversation going, you want to bring this information to your staff, maybe expand on it, there's information in the survey where you can give us your contact and we will reach out to you to try to get that scheduled. This is my contact information. Easiest way to find me, aubreyschmalley.com. From there, there's a million links to every single other thing that you could be linked to with me. And I'm always available via email or Zoom or anything like that. And phew, I made it to the end, Edith, and I see the questions populating in the side.
Yes, Dr. Schmalley, thank you so much for such an informative discussion. It was a host of things that I learned regarding recommended screen time. I really love the ideas and recommendations that you gave for school management around disconnect days. I know that it is easy and it's a temptation as educators to reward with technology because it's something that generally is not done in schools. But to be mindful about that and really set our students up for success is so beneficial. So thank you for those recommendations. We do have quite a few questions. The first one was around this great recording and where it can be found after today. Mike Meyer weighed in as well and said that it will be uploaded on the Office of Family and Community Engagement. We also are going to translate the slides into Spanish to have them available. And Aubrey, I don't want to assume, but would this also be available on your YouTube channel?
If I get the link, sure, I can put it up there.
Awesome, that would be great, just so that we can canvas lots of areas. So please, folks, look out on those platforms for this recording. Our first question, Dr. Schmalley, is around television. And I know it's differentiated because we have phones, we have tablets, we have Alexas, we have all kinds of devices. This parent would like to know, is TV considered screen time? And would you differentiate it at all?
Yeah, actually, that is a very interesting question because I would say before smartphones and tablets, there was a huge concern about spending too much time in front of the television. And actually, for TV in general, they don't see it as having as much of an impact as the smartphone use because a lot of things that you're watching on TV are story-based and they're longer, so they do require more attention from children usually. One thing I will say is the physiological effects, like the LCD screen, your eyes are still working very, very hard to focus. It's still a screen. So depending on the size and location in your house, that some of those physiological things are still getting impacted. So you can still see some of those screen time effects showing up with TV as well. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you so much for that beneficial information. We're just learning this now, and we always believe that there's opportunity to learn and grow. But we do have a question about damage that's already been done. So in the instance of teenagers who've been exposed to this essentially their whole lives, or older, is there a way to reverse some of the damage done to their brain if you try alternate strategies?
So yes, actually, I would tell a quick story of a teenager that I had that refused to go to school because school was too hard and overwhelming, and he was on his screens all the time. They actually went through a process where they didn't allow him to have screens at home. He actually went through a digital detox where he couldn't have screens during the day if he wasn't in school. And then they started implementing exercise programs, social activities. He got involved in an adapted phys ed program and got the learning support that he needed. he was able to rebalance his relationship with technology because he started choosing other activities that worked well for him, and actually was so successful within a 3-year period of building in these other supports into his life that he normalized all of his test scores, and he went to a typical high school with no additional supports. So that was a huge recovery. Some people who have a big emotional road in front of them, I actually have been reading a book called Glow Kids by Dr. Kardashian, or Cardaris, sorry, what am I saying? Wrong word. I can show it really quickly on my screen. It's called Glow Kids. It's full of information. But the big recommendation, if you have a child with really significant tech addiction and mental health issues, is go through that process of getting back to nature, of reducing that stimulation and that overload, getting away from the technology in a big way, and then again filling in those skill gaps. So the way out is by filling in the parts that are missing, and then you can kind of phase technology back in a more moderated way.
We have a really great question. We are very intent, and you even mentioned the importance of movement breaks and being sensory and getting our body going. We know that sometimes technology is the great equalizer. It gives information where it doesn't exist otherwise. We have a question around the intersection of those two things. How do you feel about teens using exercise videos in order to get movement? And I know that I have a secondary question because I know a lot of educators, me being one of them, would use or encourage Go Noodle, and what does that mean in the classroom? So would you be able to talk a little bit about that intersection of movement breaks and video media stimulation?
Yes. So I think the biggest thing is that if you're coming off of technology and then you're going to a technologically based movement break, there's no space in between for the brain to recover and reduce that visual stimulation. So I am not opposed to using videos. I even use videos myself for exercise if I need someone else to guide me, because I think the reality is some of us are just not that creative when it comes to exercises, and we need someone else to tell us the most beneficial thing to do. But again, back to the balance, if you're only doing video-based movement and that's your only movement, and you're not a kid who maybe does after school sports, or maybe you're not that adept on the playground, whatever, you're still out of balance. So one of the things that I will encourage teachers to do is not that you can't use Go Noodle at all, but maybe you want to alternate it, or maybe you want to make sure that you can pick some simpler things that you can actually implement pretty easily. And that's actually why I made body activated learning, because it comes with like little cards that you can pick, and even you can get like fit decks, things like that are out there as well, that are easy to choose and are purposely not screen based. So even if you get introduced to the exercise in a screen and you get familiar with how to do it because you watch the video, is there a way to transition away from those exercises and try to repeat it on your own, or to add in some other exercise or movement-based activity that isn't in front of the screen to keep that balance? And then the last recommendation I would make is, if you do nothing else and you're still going to use Go Noodle, at the end of Go Noodle, do that vision break. Make sure that there's lots of opportunity for kids' eyes and bodies to recover from the screen time event.
I really appreciate you sharing the screen time recommendations and how over 6, it really is just leading to judgment. I'm a mom of 2 teenage kids. They're 14 and 16 and both in high school. Sometimes their homework and things that they're required to do from school are media and technology based. How do we leverage that with downtime and entertainment when we know of the harmful things, even though it's beneficial academically, but still the light, still the stimuli, still all of the things that we discussed? Do you have any recommendations around balance?
Yes, I think it's hard. I think so. One of the things that my daughter and I do is that we have a puppy. So in between the homework and maybe any if she wants to spend a little bit of evening time watching some videos about animals or whatever she wants to watch, that we'll take a walk or we'll do something in between that creates that space, whether we take the dog out or we do a puzzle or play a game together, something like that, to build in maybe a short amount of quality time, but also create that tech-free space, or even help with dinner or something like that. But you're planning it in such a way that you're alternating the technology with something that maybe is low tech, no tech, and then maybe having some time to go back to the technology at another time.
That
Um,
that's
Go
so
ahead.
helpful, and it's very similar to the advice that you'd given before, and it really seems to be breaking it up and giving your brain a chance to reset.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it's much harder in middle school and high school because so much is coming through. I do think my daughter has actually asked for me to get the textbook for some of her classes because she really struggles to read content online. And she notices that for her, it's much harder for her to absorb. So we do get the hard copies and she will go and print things off so that she can read them and look at them and then either write down her answers and or if she can, she'll just type them into the Google Doc or whatever to finish the assignment. But she's actually the because she lives with me. And at first, she never wanted to listen to anything mom says. And now it's starting to make sense that she's on technology all the time, that she's finding that rhythm and finding those opportunities to actually advocate for herself because she realized that I know I learned better this way, mom. So can you help me out and figure out a way for me to do this in a screen-free way so that I can learn more?
That is an awesome example. And I think it's very similar to the story that you told regarding the teenage boy that got unaddicted from technology. And I think it's a lot about how we educate. We want to do extrinsic motivation until it becomes intrinsic and people just feel good and feel better in what's healthy. So
Mhm.
thank you for those examples.
It's kind of like starting a new exercise program, right? It's going to be good for you. Your body doesn't want to because it's hard. So at first, you're just putting the sneakers on, right? And finally, when you start feeling a little more energy or you start saying, oh, hey, look, I got a little muscle over there, you start to get a little more invested. What started out as a really hard change now becomes a habit that you gravitate towards because now instead of getting all your dopamine and reward from screens, you're actually getting dopamine from real life activities. It's just in a little more delayed manner than you have it on screens.
And we had a question just populate in the Q&A, and it's from a parent, and this comes up all the time. We understand how social kids are and how connected they are, and they want to feel a sense of belonging. This parent is worried about her children complaining that their friends get more screen time or already have cell phones, really in this instance of trying to keep up with the Joneses and
Mhm.
messages for parents to stay strong.
Yes, yes. There is a lot of social pressure. People think that, and we find all sorts of reasons why our kids need to have a cell phone, right? So that we can feel safe and know where they are and what they're doing. But I would say to that, there is delay it as long as you can. Um, there are more and more children at younger and younger ages. I mean, we saw that at 6 and above, no one's really saying what you should be doing for your children. So that makes it a parent decision. But at the same time, I think making that decision depends on a lot of factors, right? You know your child. You know if your child's already struggling with attention issues, already having trouble, following directions, or has a lot of tantrums, or is very emotional. All of these things, sort of give you insight into how your child is developing and their ability to kind of break away from screens, or their tendency to be that kid that's really addicted to screens and needs to be shown how to find that balance. And there's not, ideally delay it as long as you can, because when you get to middle school and high school, you're definitely going to be using technology all the time. But so many of our teachers are finding their own way into tech-free spaces because of their personal experience with COVID and trying to teach students via technology. So it's hard. I definitely empathize, but I think the children who lobby the most for technology are probably the children who need it the least. And if you're the one looking out for their long-term happiness and mental health and success, they're going to go in whatever direction their friends go. And so as you can guide them, it's always you'll thank me for this later, right? We say that a lot as parents, and we just wait for that later to come. Just keep reminding yourself that's where you have to stay strong. They will thank you for it later.
Absolutely. And Joanne Freiberg, welcome to the screen. We are lucky to be in your presence. Joanne Freiberg, for folks who haven't been exposed before, is a consultant with School Climate Consultants. Joanne, here's a question in the chat, and I'd like to pose it for you and Aubrey. I think you're both well suited to answer it. A parent asks about their 15-year-old daughter being very headstrong and refusing to step away from technology. Do you have any advice on how to convince her to get away from the phone and join an activity or do something? The question reads.
Let me just head into that one by feeding into the last question. First of all, there are guidelines around when youth should have social media, and it's 13. And kids weigh their parents down with that argument, oh, everybody's doing it, everybody's doing it. And I'm going to be my usual blunt and direct self and say, I think we need to be parents. And I think we need to be very clear role models. So I think that there are plenty of parents out there who are holding the line and saying no, and not being worn down by the argument, everybody's doing it. So let's leave that. And if you move into this one, yes, 15-year-olds are very headstrong. But I think that the most important thing that we as adults, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers, administrators, and so on, is role modeling. And if we can't step away, it's really hard to ask them to step away. So if you have a headstrong 15-year-old, that's what 15-year-olds do. If anybody who's had one knows. But I think the most important thing that we can do is monitor our own technology use, because it damages all of us. And we are the first teachers. And as such, I would recommend all of us in schools and as parents sort of rethinking and going back to a time, certainly look at me, I'm old enough, when technology was not part of our lives. And there was so much better learning and so on. We're addicted. We're all addicted. It's not just kids, it's adults. And so the more we can look at ourselves and be willing to say, I'm going to step away, and I insist you step away because I'm your parent and I'm doing what's in the best interest of you. So it's not a matter of convincing a 15-year-old. We're responsible for that 15-year-old. And I don't know if Aubrey would disagree with me, but I see that all the time, which is why when we do in-person trainings, we create a technology-free zone, because we do so much of this, we don't do enough of this.
Yeah. And I think actually, to piggyback on what you said, Joanne, we talked about the idea of being present, right? And in modeling, the idea of creating times in your family where everyone is putting the phone down, you're also saying, don't do as I say, do as I do. This is going to be a group effort. We all think this is hard, and you're not the only one, who has to do it, while we get to do whatever we want because we're grown-ups. And kids, especially teenagers, right? They pick up on that right away. And if you're telling them to do something you're not doing, there's no way that they're going to follow suit. They just dig their heels in even more. So start with those little times, right? Those little moments where it's like, okay, well, you know what? We're going to be here as a family. And even if it's only for an hour and it's really hard for all of us, we're going to try to do this, and we're going to cultivate this ability to be without our screens.
That is an awesome suggestion, Dr. Schmally. And Mrs. Freiberg, we have just 1 minute left. Is there any closing thought that we'd like to leave with our families? We have in the question and answer a compliment about what a fabulous presentation this is. So thank you, Dr. Schmally, for being very clear and articulate with your message. And is there anything that you'd like to leave us with?
It's a process, and my hope is that it's not just going to be on the parents. It's not just going to be on the educators. It's not just going to be on the Minecraft video game camps that are out there in the world. It takes a village to make the shift, because the world of technology pushes so hard against us and sucks us in. And some of our kids are much more vulnerable than others. And, we don't set limits for fear of the level of reactivity that happens when we try to set limits. And those are the kids where, some of those parents need more help. They need a larger support system to try to address the issue, while others can take a lot of the things that we talked about today and start with just one habit here and there and build that awareness and help kids understand that they feel happier when things are in balance for them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schmally. Thank you to all the participants that came out today. Thanks again, everyone, for attending tonight. Thank you to the Office of Family Engagement. We're appreciative of our community partners in SPEF and Stanford Cradle to Career to deliver such great information to our families. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.